I do think that the focus has to be on tackling disadvantage, on tackling unequal access to services and so on. I mentioned right at the start that this issue about bridging that gap between poor and rich, and actually by lowering the level of earnings by the rich so that the gap is much smaller, I think is a really important objective. It's not going to happen overnight, but I think it's something we should aim for. And I am beginning to be convinced that this argument about the brain drain actually doesn't stand up. I think there are some other principles. I mean, one is quality. Albert mentioned quality of life, and I agree with that, but quality generally, because in circumstances where there is less money, there is the great temptation to spread what money there is very thinly. I think that's the wrong answer. I think whatever you do properly.
More time needs to be spent on actually finding relevant industry for today in all of the different areas around the country so that people actually have the opportunity to give and contribute, rather than actually what a lot of people do in Greenock now, and it's a terrible thing to see, is actually fleece the state because they can and they've got nothing else to do. So it's about creating opportunity, it's about looking for the industry that is relevant and actually working really hard to deliver those industries to places. And so vision, leadership, but industry at the heart is the engine of regeneration for people in the community.
My name is Tim Gill. I'm a writer and consultant. My main interest is childhood and the way childhood is changing. My question is going to broaden that out a bit and ask about families. And really just to ask the panel what each of you think we've learned about how neighbourhoods can be made more family friendly through regeneration, and maybe how we can apply that learning in the future.
Before I joined the coalition in January, I worked for 10 years trying to regenerate parts of very deprived areas of Kent. And I absolutely understand the importance of giving people opportunities to participate in their communities, the impact that has on confidence, self-esteem, connectedness, mental well-being, physical health, the whole kabang, you know. Lots of the attempts that we try and achieve, or lots of the aspirations we achieve through national politics can be resolved through a good job with a good employer and good prospects. So I totally, really accept that. What I would say is that there are so many people now so far away from the labour market, that's the real challenge.
The regeneration, the renaissance of our urban areas actually has to address the fundamental problems. And if we don't deal with the fundamental problem of the economy, then we will undermine all the investment that goes in through regeneration. And Vince was correct in what he said. You have to add in all those issues about education, skills, health, etc. It's about a coherent approach to regeneration. And I'm afraid most British cities, most British urban areas have failed, I think, to understand that agenda.
What's worrying about it is that, as you quite correctly described, I mean, the two sources of employment, one is in the retail sector that was sustained by a consumer boom that's come to an end, and the other is government in big, local and national, which is going to contract. And it's the same story in the northeast of England and other areas. So there is a real adjustment problem. And as you know, Upper Clyde Shipbuilders and Yarrow disappeared, and the comparable industries disappeared almost everywhere else in Britain. The one interesting exception being the Howland and Wolff Yard in Belfast, which is actually a flourishing industrial development. They got some entrepreneur who's found all kind of ways of using shipyards and lots of jobs, but that is exceptional. I mean, the problem facing Greenock and other areas trying to rediscover their industry is that they lost shipbuilding partly because of a competition they couldn't handle from Korea and Japan, and we're now in an environment where industrial markets are very, very much more competitive and globally integrated than they used to be. And you now have China has made a major appearance, and within Europe, you have 40, 50 years of Mittelstand enterprises in Germany that haven't just come from nowhere. They exist, and you can't just recreate in Britain some substitute overnight. What will happen, and you're quite right, you've got to have new industrial activities. I mean, it can only come from entrepreneurs, and we have a lot of them. There is a lot of very good ideas in intellectual property out there. They now have the advantage of a big devaluation, which is helping to make some of those enterprises competitive. What can government do? Well, the big factor holding back a lot of these small, medium-sized companies that create jobs is credit. And the reason I'm taking a very aggressive approach to the banks is that they've overcompensated and they're not making credit available to these companies, and they're strangling them. You have failures of infrastructure, and that is something government can do something about. And we have failures within the education system that are making sure that a lot of, at the moment, far too many kids coming from secondary schools in Greenock, Birmingham and everywhere else are not employable. And a lot of the people in the higher education sector are not equally employable, and you're getting a growing problem of graduate employment. So, you know, the old bums on seats approach to higher education is badly inappropriate for the kind of future that you envisage.
Thank you all very, very much for coming. Drinks and canapes through that door. I hope you'll all stay and join us and carry on the conversations that have already been started. And thank you all very much, and I'm sorry we overran a bit.
It was quite interesting to hear different opinions and different ideas from people, what they think about and how they can help to resolve the issue regarding the present condition, situation in the economy and in the community.
There were some really interesting insights into what might happen post-May, and depending on who gains control and how they'll look at things, particularly the sort of green paper around planning and how changing planning policy might influence the way we approach regeneration. So that was very valuable. I think some of the other stuff around how communities get engaged is not as thought through as it could be. And I think there needs to be further conversation, particularly with local government who've been at this for a while now, about how we can facilitate that happening in a better way.
I think the important theme, or the main message came out, is that leadership and vision are important, but the leadership has to be quality leadership and knows where it's going, and the vision has to be the right sort of vision. I think you need a little bit more than leadership and vision, because you could lead in the wrong direction and the vision could be a little bit blinkered. So I think what I understand Renaisi to be about is about partnership, working with other organisations, but with local authorities in the centre of things.
It felt a little bit like a party political broadcast, if I'll be honest with you. It didn't always feel like these were genuine. They were generally addressing the answers or the question, which is what next. I feel that they'll giving us their party line to some extent. I don't know if there was much in a way of pragmatic solutions for what we actually might do differently. There's nothing much beyond aspirations really. Not much nuts and bolts stuff which I'd like to see, which I think is what's missing. I think that there are lots of people with good ideas out there who are doing really good work, such as social enterprise, which is talked about, and I think there needs to be talk about more how that links in and how government would actually make that easier and how local authority can actually work easier with those kind of organisations.
Well, I'm a big fan of Renaisi. I've worked very closely with Renaisi when I worked at Hackney, and I like to keep in touch with how they're doing. But the other thing about a Renaisi event is they generally get some fantastic speakers, and they haven't let us down tonight. It was great to hear from Caroline Spelman about the new green paper, which has a lot of reading in it, I'm sure. But I was particularly impressed with Lord Ball Sir Ball from Birmingham, who gave us the two key words in regeneration: vision and leadership. So really good night.